Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. When you create a void, that void is filled. If you cede ground by relaxing, then the other group will take that ground. If you just relax and stop pushing as hard against the government, it will start pushing harder against you, and it will take your money and your rights. There's all downside, no upside. Vigilance is truly the price of freedom, right? There's all downside and no upside to just, relaxing and stop fighting government. Like, even when you're truly free, you have to keep fighting government and make sure it doesn't start, encroaching on your freedom. Much less when you're totally enslaved like now, when you really have to fight. There's no such thing as freedom. At least not like there's no such thing in freedom in terms of you can't be completely outwardly free and completely free to do whatever you want. You can either be inwardly restrained, which allows outward freedom, or you can be inwardly unrestrained, which necessitates outward slavery. There's no such thing as freedom. You can either be free from being morally restrained, so you don't need outward rules, because you restrain yourself, you're moral, honorable, hardworking, courageous, generous, etc. But if you're not moral, then the government will restrain you with laws. I'm not saying that's the only reason government makes laws. They want to enslave you even when they don't have to, but how much more will they make laws when they have to enslave you because you yourself are refusing to be moral? You see, so if you're not moral, then the government will restrain you with laws. You'll have given the government the excuse that it wants to increase tyranny. You'll give the government an excuse to make more laws. People who want to be free need to be moral so that they can collectivize, so that they can have the power necessary to resist the government so that they can be free. You can only oppose the government with enough people willing to die to keep the government out of your area. And so strong cohesion is necessary. And yet this strong cohesion is only possible if everyone in the group is highly moral. To be able to not cede power to the government, that is, to be able to not give up power to the government, you must have a tightly knit group of enough people. Let's say several thousand at least, if not tens of thousands. And they have to be highly moral and willing to die to keep the government out. That's the only way to not cede power to the government. By not uniting, men are ceding power to the government. They're giving up power to the government by refusing to unite. MGTOW praises separation and just throws up its hands and says that men can never work together. That's preposterous. Men can't work together today because they lack virtue. But men of the past were highly virtuous, and that's why they were able to work together. If men are virtuous, men can work together. They did in the past, and they can again. Men were monogamous in the past and could be monogamous again. Men worked together in the past and could work together again. Men were united in the past and could be united again. Men were brave in the past and could be brave again. Men fought off government and had extreme freedom in the past, and thus men could fight off government again and be free again. Men need to stop being cowardly and defeatist like MGTOW is. Men need to realize that unity is possible. It just requires morality and monogamy and living in the same place and being brave enough to be willing to die to keep the cops out. And if you have enough people like that all living on the same plot of land, then you really will be able to keep the cops out. Because the cops will be too scared to try to enter the commune by force. Cops are bullies. They pick on weaker people. That's why they always shoot first and ask questions later. Because they're cowards. It's not just because they're trained to shoot first and ask questions later. It's also because they're cowards. And being cowards, they are not going to try to wage a war against a very well-armed commune full of incredibly brave guys who are willing to die for their principles. Cops aren't willing to die for principles. Not at all. Cops don't have any principles. They're just doing a job for a paycheck. And as far as SWAT and stuff like that, they're cowards too. They're arrogant, aggressive, trigger-happy assholes who get off on dominating other people. They're not the same kind of cowards as cops are. Cowards are cops are real cowards, but SWAT are cowards who think that they're not cowards. They're tough guy cowards, right? Like I said, they're arrogant, aggressive, trigger-happy assholes who get off on dominating other people. SWAT are. They're kind of like prison guards, right? But they never have to go up against anyone who is as strong as them. SWAT doesn't. SWAT certainly never has to go up against anyone who's both as strong as them, more numerous than them, and more willing to die than they are, such as a commune. SWAT never has to go up against those kind of people. SWAT are not willing to die because they're not fighting for principles. They're doing it for a paycheck too. They just like to think of themselves as badasses, but they never go up against a superior power. And so SWAT are actually cowards who think they're brave. But if they have to go up against a well-armed commune who would rather die down to the last man, woman, and child rather than let the government into the commune, Well, that's something else. That's something that SWAT would not be able to go up against because it would be defeated. All the SWAT members would die or be driven back or forced to retreat, and even if SWAT did go up against the commune and win, it would pay a very heavy price for doing so, meaning a lot of SWAT members would die. And then that might hamper SWAT recruitment, because if lots of people are forming communes and SWAT is having to take down lots of communes and is suffering a high death count every time it has to take down a commune, then a lot of people would stop wanting to join SWAT, because even SWAT members probably are not foolish enough to actually deeply believe in the idea that the government is virtuous and that it's morally justified to attack peaceful communes and murder all the men and women and children inside just to stamp out the peaceful commune's existence for basically no reason whatsoever. There will never be an increase in freedom unless government shrinks or until it utterly collapses. But then you have absolute madness and chaos if it collapses. And then, and that's not the chaos of anarcho-capitalism. That's the chaos caused by the failure of statism. So that's a consequence of statism too, the chaos that happens from a government collapse. And nothing good will happen in a government collapse. Like, it'll just be madness. It'll be starvation and maybe warlords, or who knows what kind of hellish things, mass rape maybe. I mean, it will not be pleasant no matter who you are. I mean, even the billionaires will be worried about their security forces overtaking them and stuff. I saw some video or something, some guy was saying like the number one question by like these rich people who have these escape plans and these hideouts, and they're going to grow their own food in like a former government base in the mountain and all this kind of stuff. Like, they're worried about like how do they not get taken over by the guys who are protecting them. So even the billionaires are worried about this stuff. Not enough obviously to actually force the government to stop being evil and insane, but they are worried in terms of like if the collapse happens, maybe even they won't fare so well. Maybe the head of their security will overthrow them and become a warlord and steal all their money, and now he's in charge. You know what I mean? Like, so government collapse is not good. I mean, we should get rid of government, but a collapse of the government is not something we should be looking forward to, right? So there will never be an increase in freedom unless government shrinks or until it utterly collapses, which even then that would give you technical freedom because you're not, there's no cops enforcing any laws, but at the same time, now you're enslaved to the hellish chaos around you. That's not freedom. You know what I mean? Like, freedom requires stability, right? So in one sense, you're free if the government utterly collapses, but in another sense, you're not free at all. You know what I'm saying? So we'll never be free until either government shrinks or collapses, or until men start joining together and pushing back against government by forming communes which keep the government out with force. And it might be preferable if multiple communes had a loose affiliation with each other to protect each other, so that if the cops try to take down one commune, all the other communes attack the government forces which would have surrounded the commune. That way the cops would think twice about attacking any commune because of all of them being willing to attack the government to defend any other commune, especially if all the communes are fairly near each other. Not like next to each other, but maybe in like, they're all, sort of in the same area, right? Like maybe you could have a bunch of communes all constellating around, San Francisco or something. One's to the north of San Francisco, one's to the west, one's to the east, one's to the south, etc. Like not really near each other, but nearby, so that they could, they just get, texted or whatever from someone in the commune, hey, we're being attacked by the cops, and then all the other communes converge and surround the cops who are surrounding the cops or the SWAT who are surrounding the first commune. So now the government's surrounded, you know what I mean? Like, then you could, perhaps protect communes easier that way. And then each of the communes could do their own thing, or you could have all the communes all next to each other, and then they're all doing their own thing. Like, you want everybody to be free. Like, you don't want to have each commune forcing its own rules on all the other communes, but at the same time, all the communes should be cohesive and protect each other against the government, right? This is important, I think. Because if they're all divided against each other, none of them are willing to defend the other communes, even if they disagree with those communes somewhat. Like, one commune's, bigamist or trigamist or polygamous, and another polygynous, and another commune is strictly monogamous, another commune's a MGTOW monk commune, no women in it, they don't marry at all. Like all those communes, they should protect each other, because that makes them all more powerful, So that way the cops would think twice about attacking any commune, because of all of them being willing to attack the government to defend any other commune that's attacked. right? And the communes could also share information about what techniques and policies they're using to run their commune, right? And then when a policy or technique fails, they could tell the other communes that they've given up using that strategy because it failed. That way, the other communes could learn from all the other communes and would not have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to learning what works and what doesn't. Although just imitating communities which already exist and have techniques which do work might make such a thing unnecessary. If you already know what works, then just do that. No need to experiment and learn which experiments work and which don't. Or no need to experiment as much, right? Like you could do the whole Rumspringa thing from the Amish, and you could do the whole, keeping the money in house like the Wandering Tribe does. Only buying, making sure you buy stuff or products or services from other people in your group first, so that each dollar that comes into the community circulates many times, so there's more money coming in than going out, so that the community is getting richer and richer, right? And even if standard of living stays the same, maybe you're pouring that money into breeding more, but that's increased power as well, right? And there's other techniques used by other communities as well. Use the technique of having the women in the commune who are married, wear headscarves like, Muslim women do, that kind of thing. Like each little, community, each religion or each group or whatever, that's already existed in society and still exists today and has existed for hundreds of years. A lot of these things, they have these groups or whatever, these religions or whatever, they each have their own little techniques that make their society work. And you could take one of those techniques one or two of those techniques from each of those societies, combine them all together in your own society, and that might make that society work better than any other ever before, because you're using all the techniques which work. You know what I mean? And then finally, I want to mention a bit of Illuminati occult symbolism in a Dove body wash commercial. It showed 3 women, and one, or maybe 2 of them, I can't remember, but at least one of them had tattoos of triangles on her body. On her arm, on the inside near the pit of her elbow, she had 3 triangles tattooed on her. I think it was triangles, although it might have been upside down V's that, the bottom line of the triangle is just implied. But either way, like the one in the middle had a dot inside the triangle, which obviously symbolizes Nye, so it's Illuminati symbolism. And the other 2 triangles had lines through them. They did not have dots. No dots, but they had a line delineating a capstone. But it looked like one of them had the line go past the outside lines, right? Kind of like the A in the anarchy symbol. So it didn't so much look like a pyramid as it looked like the symbol for the element of air. That is the occult symbol for the, the element of air, like, earth, water, fire, and air. And I can't remember whether the triangle pointing up with the line through it is earth or whether that's air. And then the triangle pointing down with the line through it is either earth or air. But I think the one pointing up is air, if it has a line through it. If it doesn't have a line through it, the triangle pointing up is fire. And then the downward pointing triangle without a line through it is water. But anyway, so yeah, I think it's either the element of air or the element of earth, and I think it's the element of air that was shown in the commercial. So yeah, like I said, the middle triangle was a pyramid with a dot in the center, but all the triangles may have been upside down V's, like I said before. But anyway, this pyramid, the air element symbol, and this triangle with a dot in it, these things are all very clear Illuminati symbolism. You can see the symbols quite clearly, although maybe you did not notice them when you saw the commercial. Maybe you instead only noticed the old woman in the commercial who had had a double mastectomy. If you've seen the commercial, you know which one I'm talking about. She had very short hair. So at first I thought it might be a tranny, but then I realized that it was an old feminist woman who had had her breasts removed because of a fear of breast cancer. Right, and isn't it interesting how the whole female-to-male sex change is a lot easier to mainstream when you normalize healthy women having their breasts removed out of fear of breast cancer? This just sort of makes it like, it makes it seem like it's not as unusual to have your breasts removed. Therefore, when trannies do it, it seems more normal, right? And this is also a covert way of, normalizing mastectomies in women because of fear of breast cancer is also another way of normalizing transsexualism through the back door. No pun intended. So yeah, isn't it interesting that, the whole female-to-male sex change is a lot easier to mainstream when you normalize healthy women having their breasts removed out of fear of breast cancer. Women having their breasts removed just because of having a certain gene that predisposes them to having breast cancer is ridiculous, which is something that they had one of the main characters in The Bold Type do in season 4, which is a TV show. The reason having this radical surgery is insane is because even if women want to use birth control, I think hormonal birth control greatly raises the risk of getting breast cancer. It's still a case of it being positive to have other kinds of birth control. Sorry, it's still a case of it being possible to have other kinds of birth control that don't use hormones, right? So it's not like, oh, I have this gene, but I want to have premarital sex because I'm a feminist, so I got to use birth control, and so, the hormones are going to give me, breast cancer, even though I don't admit that the birth control is what's going to give me breast cancer. Like, it's like they're not even admitting the fact that there are non-hormonal kinds of birth control, like copper IUDs, and that you could use this, and this, even if you have this breast cancer gene, not using hormonal birth control will probably make it so you still have a significantly low chance of getting breast cancer because of not using hormonal, contraception, like those genes, or that one gene or whatever that predisposes you to breast cancer. I bet you anything that only gives you breast cancer if you use hormonal birth control. And probably even if you do have that gene, your odds of getting breast cancer are probably quite low if you never use hormonal birth control, But of course, they never mention any of that in the episode, right? I'm confident that these women who have this gene, and they don't talk about it when, what's her name, did or was going to do it or whatever. I don't know if she did. What's her name? Angelina Jolie. She was going to have both her breasts removed. Maybe she did. I don't know. I don't keep up with celebrity bullshit. But yeah, I didn't really hear them talking about, hormonal birth control being the cause of breast cancer when, she was going to do that. Right? So they always don't talk about the important stuff that you really need to know. You know what I mean? They never talk about the petrodollar. They never talk about, hormonal birth control probably being the cause of breast cancer. They never talk about, fiat currency being bullshit and, sound money being important. They never talk about, how this is like shrinking government is the only way to increase prosperity, and getting rid of regulations is the only way to make housing affordable. They never tell you what you need to know. They'll complain about the problems, but they'll never give you the real solutions, because it's a slavery system. They want us enslaved, and so they're not going to give us the real solutions. They're not going to tell us the real solutions. They want us ignorant. They want to pretend like they're addressing the problems, like they're grappling with the problems, but really they're just not even trying. Either that or they're massive idiots, these people who rule the world and stuff, the so-called journalists and the politicians, etc., etc. I'm confident that these women who have this gene, which predisposes them to getting breast cancer, would have a much lower chance of breast cancer if they never use hormonal birth control, and instead either remain celibate or use a rhythm and pull-out methods with a husband, or they use birth control like a copper IUD. But like I was saying, notice how it's easier to make transsexuality far less odious if you normalize women getting their breasts removed out of a desire to avoid breast cancer. I think that's why they put the storyline into the 4th season of The Bold Type, because they want to mainstream transsexuality. They want to mainstream it to make men more tolerant of effeminacy in men, and to make homosexuality less odious, and to therefore reduce the pressure caused by the incel problem, which is getting worse due to government tyranny in financial terms, and government tyranny in terms of law, and which is getting worse because of the promiscuity of men. That is, government tyranny in financial and in legal terms, and the promiscuity of men. All this is making the incel problem worse, right? So what they want to do is instead of, let the incel pressure build and build and build until there's a revolution, what they want to do is mainstream homosexuality and transsexuality and pegging and all this disgusting stuff, so that they can get these incel men so effeminate, the average American man so effeminate, that by the time they get 50, 60, 70% of men who are incels, those men will be bisexual, so they'll just have sex with each other, so then there won't be a revolution, So, all they have to do is get most men to become bisexual or homosexual, and then they can reduce all the pressure caused by the incel problem while not changing anything, while still having all the women just go for the top 20% of men. But actually, since the cutoff line is the 20% line, I'm sure the men who are, like a lot of the low class, I shouldn't say low class, low level 9 out of 10s, like 9.1 and 9.2, 9.3 out of 10 men. I bet a lot of those men are considered just average by women. So it's probably only the 10 out of 10 men, which are really considerably above average to where women really view those guys as desirable. But like people are like, oh, well, women never wanted to date, mate with the regular guys or whatever. And I'm like, so what? We just accept women's retarded view of reality and let all the women go to the top guys? That makes no fucking sense, Like, why should women decide who's valuable and who's not? That's insane. Women are totally entitled. You know what I mean? But you'll get as much tyranny as you tolerate. So yeah, this is going to happen unless men fight back or form their own communes or their own, no-go zone or their own country. If the elites can get all men to be okay with homosexuality and okay with experimenting with bisexuality, then they can get a lot of guys to become bisexual. And if they can get a lot of guys to become bisexual, then they can completely remove any pressure that might lead to civil war over the incel issue. Because then the bottom 80% of men can just date each other, and all the women can marry the top 20% of guys. The bottom 80% of guys won't rebel because they'll be getting their sexual needs met by other guys. There won't be a civil war over the incel issue because, like I said, they'll be getting their sexual needs met by other guys. Guys will be. Regarding the symbolism of why they would use the symbol for the element of air in this Dove commercial, either it represents the forces of evil, that is, the principalities and powers of the air, as the New Testament verse says, or they use that symbol because in Western occultism, the element of air represents intellect. And it is true that the elites view themselves as intellectually superior to the sheeple, and so it makes sense that the elites would use that element to represent themselves. Plus, water is blue, and that's an element that, they use to represent the sheeple, not the elites. And, emotion is how they manipulate the sheeple, so they don't want to represent themselves that way either. Earth is just, the physical, and I guess they do rule us in the physical sense through, money, because, the physical is also related, the element of earth is also related to money, but, that's one possible reason why they might use that, element of air symbol, because maybe it refers to intellect. They use 3 triangles in that commercial, that Dove commercial. There are 3 triangles in a row all next to each other on her inner arm. And they did it this way because they often show 3 triangles. The 2 outer triangles representing the sheeple and the inner triangle representing the elites. But they also did it this way this time because they wanted to make the eye in the triangle symbol less obvious, even though it's only a dot instead of an eye. So they put capstones on the outward triangles and they put the eye in the inner triangle, that is the dot. And the inner triangle had no capstone. But if you combine those triangles, you get, a triangle with a capstone with a dot, right? So it's even more clearly then, if you combine the symbols, it's more clear that it's the Illuminati symbol of, the pyramid with the capstone with the eye and the capstone, right? So yeah, don't forget that Dove is yet another company that is part of the Illuminati. There are tons of companies that are in the Illuminati. It seems like virtually all companies that advertise on national television are Illuminati companies. They make it obvious for us to see which companies are evil. And so if you buy these companies as products, you are directly funding evil, in the same way that you are funding evil when you pay taxes to a country that wages endless war. It is morally mandatory for people to form a no-go zone and create their own companies so that they can sell the same products as these evil Illuminati companies, so that people have someone to buy these products from who are not in the Illuminati, so that people can buy these products without funding the Illuminati. If you know that the Illuminati is real, which it is, and you don't mind buying products from evil Illuminati companies, then there's something seriously wrong with you. You should be seriously upset by the fact that you have to buy products from evil Illuminati companies. You should therefore, want to not buy products from evil Illuminati companies, and therefore you should realize the only way to not buy products from them, because they're almost all companies, at least almost all big companies, the only way to do it is to form your own companies. And so you got to form a commune or a no-go zone, and then make your own companies in there that make the same products as the Illuminati companies do, and then create your own technologies of various kinds, which you would be able to do if you had a breeding program. If you're doing sperm bank sperm breeding, the IQs of your descendants would get higher and higher and higher with each generation. And I'm not talking like Flynn effect higher. I'm talking like, general intelligence higher. And general intelligence and IQ do go together because the Flynn effect reaches a limit, and then it eventually starts going back down again, as you find out when you read, At Our Wits' End by Edward Dutton and Michael A. Woodley. So, it's not as if general intelligence is not correlated with IQ. It massively is. So when I say high IQ, I'm referring to both, high IQ in a Flynn effect sense, an analytical thinking sense, which doesn't necessarily have high general intelligence. And I'm also referring to high general intelligence, which is also strongly correlated to IQ, especially over the long term, because, optimizing, your analytical thinking ability is a thing that is limited by your general intelligence, you see. And even if it's not, there's only so much that can increase, because it's increased by environmental factors. Our technological society basically forcing everybody to think in a very analytical way, you see. So this means that, if general intelligence is going down, eventually the Flynn effect reaches a limit, because there's only so much you can increase your analytical thinking ability by, environmental factors. And so then the Flynn effect starts going down as general intelligence goes down. So really, when I'm talking about both the Flynn effect and type of, analytical intelligence is not necessarily correlated with general intelligence, but I'm more talking about general intelligence and the generally higher IQ that it does give, right? Like your ability to think analytically, especially if you grow up in a highly analytical society, is higher if you have higher general intelligence, you see. So, this is what I mean when I say, you're going to have much, much higher IQs if you do a breeding program. And it's essential because, you want to have super high IQ people, but this doesn't necessarily mean people with low general intelligence. In fact, it means people with very high general intelligence. So, wanting to have high general intelligence and realizing the Flynn effect is limited and all this kind of thing, this is not an excuse to not have a breeding program. This is a reason to have a breeding program, because having a breeding program raises general intelligence, and as an effect, you'll also have, this, it won't slow down the Flynn effect or anything. It'll, if anything, accelerate it, because then your potential is higher. So then, the Flynn effect can come more into effect, because you have higher general intelligence. So you really do have to do a breeding program to keep up with the rising IQ requirement of a middle-class job. And this rising IQ requirement will keep rising. But, the Flynn effect has already reached its limit and is, actually reversing in some places. So don't even, think of the Flynn effect as even being a real thing. It's totally unimportant, really. Just think in terms of general intelligence, but realize that general intelligence is highly related to IQ. It is basically IQ, And so, when I say high IQ, I mean high general intelligence, but also high, analytical thinking ability as well, which is a little bit separate, but there's a huge overlap there. So you have to do a breeding program so you can start driving technology forward and making new products and stuff to at least keep up with, if not stay ahead of the innovations done by Illuminati companies. So you can keep making your own companies, keep those companies relevant, and then you can buy from everybody in the no-go zone. Let's say it's 1 million or 10 million people or whatever. Everybody in the no-go zone can buy the products from those companies that were created in the no-go zone, in which produce their products in the no-go zone, so everybody in the no-go zone doesn't have to buy products from evil Illuminati companies like we do today. The only way to get rich enough to do all this, to have a no-go zone and all that, is to do a breeding program. So your IQs are high enough. So you have great memories and great ability to think logically, right? And be creative and everything, and be perceptive as well. Perceptiveness and creativity and stuff are also typically related to general intelligence. So yeah, you got to undercut the Illuminati by not buying their products anymore, and the only way to do that is to create your own companies. The only way to do that is to have high IQs, and the only way to do that is to do a breeding program. So, don't use the evil system that enslaves you. Make your own technology, make your own products, do your own genetic engineering, etc. But to get all that infrastructure in place to where you can do all that, the only way to do it is to have, grandkids and great-grandkids and stuff that are higher in IQ than you, significantly higher. And the only way to do that is to do a breeding program using sperm bank sperm. This has been Redshift. Do your part. Peace.